Illegal file sharing had a profound impact on the music industry. By 2003, the market had contracted by 20% as a result of technologies such as Napster. Today, we consider whether it was ever okay to steal music. We also look at whether, without Napster, was there ever going to be a Spotify? And finally, with the rise of generative AI, is ChatGPT actually the new Napster? Al, this is an interesting one. We were there in the 90s. Was this ever okay?
Yeah, good morning, Matt. That's a great question. I mean, in a way, we're kind of all mob wives, aren't we? We love to wear the fur coat, but we don't necessarily want to know where it's come from. Now, we have to take a few steps back, don't we? We have to go back to the late 80s and 90s. I mean, there was file sharing around, but it was, of course, in different formats. I mean, we were kids, mate. I remember getting up early and taping a TV show called Rage. So for our US watchers, similar to MTV, and I'd have Dad's kind of, cassette recorded there and the microphone, and you'd tape your favourite songs from the show, and then you'd go around on your bike and show your mates and have a bit of a listening party during the day. So in different shapes and forms, it's always been around, mate, but the evolution of it has been really kind of interesting because it kind of quickly went from tapes onto CDs and then, of course, onto MP3s, mate. But the issue with CDs, of course, you remember, for us, they were Australian $30. That's a lot of money when you're a young whippersnipper, mate, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, it doesn't justify copying and pirating, but it is in context around what was happening at the time. It was quite expensive to be somebody who was into their music, and you're taking a bet on the purchase of your CD. You couldn't take it back if you didn't like it, and you only had limited information to go by. So you got the internet going, MP3s emerge, and the actual activity of downloading an MP3, so you had FTP sites before Napster, wasn't too dissimilar to what you did before then.
No, it wasn't, but the difference was, and I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts, mate, like those kind of websites, I never really understood how it kind of worked, especially at the time. I mean, I do now, but they were for more of the geeks, I guess. But if you knew these kind of people, geez, it was handy, because I remember having a mate that I would send a list of songs to and bounce him a few beers, and he'd kind of download all this kind of stuff, and I thought it was wonderful. I thought there was some sort of magic to it.
I think that the record industry was complicit to what was going on until it was actually a problem. So was it ever okay? I don't think so. I think that the real problem is that the generation of, the old saying around, your kids are the only ones who could program the VCR. Well, these kids were basically adults by the time we got to the late 1990s. And all of a sudden you had something with Napster where it effectively made that experience or made the steps that you needed to go through quite a deal easier. And where it became a problem is that, you got more and more kids who became tech savvy. The internet was not just somebody's hobby anymore. It was a thing that was here to stay. And even the adults in the room, like they were seeing this as being brilliant and just so easy.
And we haven't really touched on the whole portability of music. So when MP3s came out, of course, then came the MP3 player. And I remember selling these at my workplace, and they absolutely took off, because the difference was you didn't have to have this huge CD player hooked up with your headphones. You had a little device that you could put in, and you could use it for exercise and all different types of purposes. So again, there was a change in the industry, which meant that the industry had to kind of react to what was going on here. So, and that's always been kind of interesting, hasn't it? So everyone's using Napster at the time, and more people who aren't tech savvy are starting to use these. And then, of course, there's been LimeWire, and that leads up to the industry reacting and the invention of Spotify, mate.
Yeah, I mean, you've got iTunes, which really was the precursor where you could purchase individual songs for 99 cents. So that was a good deal compared to CDs, especially in an Australian context. But I guess the question then is, Al, I think with Spotify, we were early adopters of that, felt it was a good deal. We love listening to, CDs, we listen to albums. But do you think there ever would have been a Spotify had there not been a Napster?
I think without Napster, Spotify would have eventually come along, but it might have looked different. I think Napster had a huge influence on what Spotify was to look like, but I think the difference with Spotify in the evolution of these changes is its algorithms and the use of artificial intelligence to create curated playlists and DJ mixes and all these different types of things, which of course Napster didn't really have. That was just a file sharing service. So that was the biggest evolution from what Napster was to what Spotify is now and to where we're going next.
I don't think there was any reason for the music industry to disrupt itself. So there was a real problem with piracy that was plaguing the industry in the 2000s. Now, I think that without that occurring, you might have had versions of the service where you might have only had select parts of a catalogue. So there's really only 3 or 4 players. You have obviously a range of independents. But I see parallels with what was going on with Napster in relation to generative AI. It feels like the Wild West to me. I don't know. Am I the only one feeling that way?
No, definitely not, mate. I mean, you and I often have a look at different people out there on YouTube kind of producing these different AI mixes of artists and vocals and songs and all this kind of stuff. So we're at that real experimental stage, and I guess you can really akin it to the Wild West, and we're kind of in the midst of it, which is really exciting because just when you think, life's getting a bit boring, there's something to absolutely kind of change it all up. But my kind of question is, the direction which AI is going to influence the music industry, being such a question mark at the moment, is both exciting and a little bit daunting. And for the potential for good, the bad and the ugly is really there, mate. Would you agree with that, or do you have a different stance?
Yeah, look, I feel as if there's some guardrails that still need to be established. I think that there's talk of people's voices being kind of licensed off so that you could actually see a synthesized version of somebody singing. I think this is much, much more profound than just music. So I think you're now sort of talking about ideas. That could be visual. It could be someone's intellectual property. It becomes a lot more general in terms of what these tools are able to really hoover up and produce out. And you have this issue again where somebody's contribution doesn't get remunerated. So let us know in the comments, do you feel as if you're doing anything wrong when you might have been using Napster back in the day? Do you think that Spotify would have existed had there not been a Napster? And finally, do you actually see the parallels there?